Welcome to the session for lesson planning and delivery. In this session, we will be covering our program called Networks, Social Studies program from grade 6 to 12. And we want to make sure we're supporting teachers with not just the content and the planning side of the lesson, but to how can you actually deliver and effectively deliver a lesson. That's what the session is going to be about. We're going to do a model lesson and we'll show you how you can deliver it in your classroom. A lot of people requested us for this webinar, so we are here to make sure that we answer your requests. I'm your moderator for today, and I'll be in the background to support you. If you have any questions at all, you have any technical difficulties, let me know in the chat box or the Q&A box, and I'm happy to help you. And we've got our trainer for today, Steve Tutunik. He's back with us. Some of you might remember him. He joined us for the back to school sessions. He's a senior humanities curriculum specialist at McGraw Hill. Thank you, Steve, for being here.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And just a few housekeeping slides from my end before I pass over to Steve. Just make sure that once you're in the session, you're connected. So you have to make sure you're able to hear us. Once you have to connect the audio is what I'm trying to say. And then also close down any high networking app like Netflix, YouTube, any gaming platform. Most likely it will affect the bandwidth of your webinar as well. We are more than happy to have any Q&A, question answers. You have any questions for Steve at all, make sure you drop them in the Q&A and we can cover that up, or Steve can equally pick them up and then answer you right on the spot. We will be giving you the recording of this session, so it's going to come to your email address, the same email address that you registered for during this webinar. You will have the certificate as well if you've attended the live webinar, so we will be handing out the certificates to you as well. You don't have to mark yourself attended; you're automatically attended once you log in the session. We want to make sure this is as interactive as possible. So make sure you interact with us, engage with us, participate as much as you can. A little note that I just want to mention is, as you can see on your chat box right here, it says host and panelists. If you could just click on the drop down for me and select everyone, then you all can participate amongst yourself. Your colleagues, your peers can see your comments. It's just set to host and panelists right here. So if you can just click on the drop down again and select everyone, then everyone apart from the host can see your comments as well. I mean, the host can also see it, but also other participants will be able to view. And like I said, use the chat box, interact with us, let us know where you're joining from, tell us what sessions you teach and what grades you teach, but equally don't forget to ask any questions, any technical difficulties. I'm right here to help you out. And that's it for now. I hope you find this session really useful and make the most of it. Thank you. I'll stop sharing for now. Thank you, Bayan. I got your email address now. Perfect. I will send over the recording.
Thanks, Suresh. Thank you so much. And if you haven't already done so, if you'll let me know in the chat box which course or title of social studies that you teach, that'll be very helpful. I'm going to be targeting today, I'm going to use United States history as kind of a demonstration, but it works consistently throughout any title that you have for social studies, grades 6 through 12. So I'm going to kind of take you back as far as a teacher. If I'm planning out a lesson, some things I'm going to consider, some things I'm going to consider for students that may struggle with the reading level, some students that may be at a higher advanced level. So the first thing I'm going to do is take you to the platform through networks. And if by chance, if anyone does not have an access or code, or if you do want to log into your account and kind of go through it with me, this will be hands-on. So I'll give you a chance to kind of model something and let you dig in yourself. But if you do not have your code right now, you're not able to access the platform, just let me know in the chat box and I'll get you a code. So we're going to start off right here with the lesson plan, kind of where we begin. But I want to make sure you're really clear on kind of the other things that you can add into your lesson plan. So the first thing I want to mention is the inquiry journal. So a lot of times within the teacher instruction, it doesn't allude to the inquiry journal. This is something that's kind of an additional support piece. I would even go as far as to say it is a must do. This is very new. You may have not even seen this before. So we'll talk about how to incorporate that into your lesson plans, as well as the reading essentials, the BTW, which is your current events that are updated on a bi-weekly basis, And the fourth item that I'm going to talk about as far as lesson plan instructions and some of the decisions you're going to make is SmartBook. Again, another new enhanced feature added to the platform. So those are the four things that I'm going to tie into the lesson plan structure of today. So step one, I'm going to click on the lesson plan, and we're going to be looking at chapter 3, and we're going to be looking at the resources. Now, when I begin, I always start with a big picture in mind, the end in mind. What is it that's going to meet the needs of all my students? And when you look at your lesson instruction, if I were just to start off with lesson 1 and lesson 2 and move on, I'd be missing some critical elements. The very last 3 blades, the chapter wrap up, the intervention and remediation, and the gifted and talented are always the first things I look at. Yes, they're at the bottom. Look at those first because that's going to help you make the decisions you're going to make. So let's take a look at the chapter wrap up first. So once I click there, you'll see that I have my blades open, and I can simply click on the right corner here and expand all, or I can customize my lesson plans, which we'll do that in a moment. And you'll notice here that there's chapter projects. Now, if that's your style of teaching, if that's your style of working with your students, if you want to do more of a project-based oriented classroom performance task, I actually assign the projects first before I begin the chapter. And the projects are something that the students are going to work on throughout the chapter. Definitely more engaging, definitely more hands-on for the students. I've seen many teachers that are more of the lecture-based style. That's great. But the way students work and think and create today give them the opportunity to do some of these projects. So again, you'll kind of see some listings here that I can easily assign to the students. So that was one. The second thing I'm going to look at is some of the intervention or remediation, and then we'll look at gifted and talented. So as I think about my big picture in mind, here's just some strategies for intervention or remediation, some strategies that are great for all students, just accessing background knowledge. This may be a document that I will incorporate in the lesson. So I'm going to kind of plan out my lesson, and I'm going to think to myself that I have maybe 45 minutes for my class period. You may have more than that, you may have less than that, but I'm going to kind of use 45 minutes as my gist of the lesson. So I'm going to kind of think about what is going to be crucial to make sure that the students can connect to what I'm teaching. Because a lot of times we can talk about the past, we can talk about history, and the students aren't making those relevant connections. So as I scroll down, you'll see some just other great information. I would hate for a teacher to go through lesson 1, lesson 2, and not realize that these critical elements are here. Even gifted and talented. Well, what does that really mean, gifted and talented? So again, we have some essays here, some historical interviews. Why should all my START students be part of these kind of creative activities? So these are just some suggestions. You don't have to use them all, but you can pick and choose or let your students, in the form of a choice board, choose the activities that they want to do. And what a great way to introduce the chapter or even introduce a lesson. So going through the lesson itself, I'm now going to go back to the overall chapter resources at a glance. So before I begin lesson 1, I've looked at the chapter wrap-up. I looked at the support for intervention remediation and gifted and talented. And now I'm looking at the chapter resources. Once again, I'm going to open up and expand all. And I'm going to look at the chapter level resources. What are the things I may want to use within the course? There's a lot here, and all of these are actually going to be embedded into every single lesson already. But at least I can look at this and say, okay, I definitely want to do this activity, and maybe even check it off. So, you know, year after year, these are things you like to use. You can customize this document in your lesson plan structure. Here's the lesson resources just for lesson 1. Wow, there's a lot here for video and presentation resources. Again, I'm not going to use all of these, but I may want to check out a couple of these or even ask one of my colleagues, hey, what did you use? All your slideshows are created for you. All your interactive maps are created for you. I don't have to create a thing. It's already done for me. But if I did want to add something on my own, remember with my files, you can easily upload and import something that you've created into your lesson plan structure. So let's begin looking at a lesson. I'm going to go ahead to lesson 2, a new constitution. I'm actually going to switch this and Rather than going to US history, that would be very fair. I'm going to go to world history here. I have access to all these. Again, same thing you saw with US history, same exact format, same exact setup. So I'm going to go to my lesson plans. I'm going to go to the ancient Greeks, and we're going to look at lesson 1, poets and heroes. Now, before I begin anything, I'm going to look at all the resources for that lesson. Again, first thing I always do is expand all, and I just get a glimpse of all of the resources here on the right-hand side that I may want to use. So here's my teaching resources. The first thing we do within the lesson is teach and assess. Let's have some of that prior knowledge. Let's make sure we have the students filled in with the background knowledge before we even begin anything. Here's our guiding question. How did the geography of Greece contribute to its development? Keep in mind, most of these assets, the students are already going to have in their digital ebook. So they can view these things along with you. You can project them. I'm then going to get to the next blade, which focuses on teach and assess. Again, the first Greek city-state. We're just going to go through the blades just so I can kind of point out some features. Greeks in the Dark Ages. So I'm hitting every one of these elements within the topic. And I think about these events. These are important events I want the students to study. And then we're always going to close and reflect. So I always start off, and you'll notice the different leveling here with critical thinking skills, analyzing, really focusing on that see-through framework. But I always start off with the end in mind. So rather than waiting to close the lesson, whether it's on my board or somewhere that I'm making sure my students are aware, this is the question, or this is the purpose for what we're learning. How did Homer's works help to create cultural pride among the Greeks? Is the ideal of all-around excellence a universal theme in the art and literature of other world cultures? Provide examples to support. So that's kind of like the main goal for this lesson. It's not about memorizing a date or time. We want to really dig in a little and analyze what's happening during this time period. So let's go back up to the top. And any of these resources, if I did want to add them into my presentation, I could do that. But let's just start off with what's already built in as my lesson presentation. So I'm just going to click on Start. And this is really going to help me process the organization of what is my 45 minutes really going to consist of? What are the must-dos and the may-dos? So I'm going to go to Launch Presentation, and then we'll talk about how I can customize this and add in some of those gifted and talented, add in some of those projects. So as I go through the slide deck of my presentation, I want you to notice that within each portion of the slide, the videos are already there. I can click on this menu block of the 9 blocks here, and really sets the stage of what my lesson looks like. There's my engage. This is where I'm going to want to pull in that background information that I saw in that intervention and remediation. That's critical. The teach and assess. So all of these slides are here, but maybe there's a slide I don't want. Maybe there's something else I want to add to make this more of a stimulating lesson rather than here's a slide, here's a slide, here's a slide. Let's make it interactive for our students. So when I say let's make it interactive for our students, a lot of times when I'm presenting virtually, how do I make it interactive? How do I know that student A is getting what he or she needs and student B is getting what they need? So let me show you that for a second here. So I'm going to back to the lesson. And as I mentioned, there's the 4 elements that I'm going to add in and decide how I'm going to use within my lesson plan structure. So the first one I'm going to focus on is SmartBook. So SmartBook is now your new adaptive, and this is for most titles. I'm not going to say it's for every single title. Just looking at the chat quickly, some of you mentioned what you teach. And for those of you who mentioned what you teach, yes, you do have SmartBook. It is the exact student book, but it actually adapts and personalizes to the way students learn. So before I begin even talking about this topic, I want to see where the students are at with their background knowledge based on the time period. So when they click on their SmartBook, I can assign, and I'll show you here, I can assign a specific portion of the lesson. So I'm just going to say here's a new assignment, and we'll get into assigning all that. That's the purpose of this training is really to really think about some of these resources I'm going to add into a lesson. So let's say I added in, I'm going to click here to resources, the purple tab, click on SmartBook, and I'm going to go to chapter 3, or was it chapter 4 rather? And I can decide that I wanted to assign this SmartBook prior to the introduction of chapter 4, or maybe I want students to do this along the way as I'm instructing every day, or the other option is maybe I want them to use this prior to the chapter assessment to really make sure that it's solid, it's cemented in their mind. So let's take a look at what this is. And I want you to think about your lesson structure and really how you utilize this. Some of you may want to use this as an outside independent resource that students can use if they want to, or as an assignment. But the students get this and I'll say to them, okay, if I had assigned all of chapter 4, and I can assign just lesson 1 or lesson 2, if they were to do the whole entire process here, it would take them approximately 2 hours and 17 minutes. They're focusing on the 76 concepts I want to teach. And I'll tell you right now, I usually like to assign this as a lesson, or maybe like 10 concepts at a time, maybe no more than a half hour within a period of a week. The students can choose to continue reading or continue questions. So in this case, they're going to go through their entire student edition, and it's going to highlight for them the key important facts or concepts that they need to know. All of this is audio, so it can be read aloud to them. Now, some of your students may want to start with the questions, but it's always going to go back to the questions, and it's always going to tell them it's about developing and mastering concepts. So this bar here is going to start highlighting, and it's going to just be basic random types of questions, matching true and false, all that apply, and it's going to ask for their confidence level. So again, I'm not going to utilize my time today during training to get too heavily into SmartBook. I did a lot of training earlier, so if you want that specific recording, Suresh will be happy to send that one out. That really goes into the depth of how to do everything. But the purpose here is to say, okay, here's SmartBook. How am I going to build that into my lesson structure? Because this is kind of an additional tool. This is an additional support resource, but I would hate for anyone to not utilize this resource. So number one, I would say to you, if you get a chance when you're starting your next chapter, try assigning a portion of SmartBook and get feedback from your students. It's usually the students that are going to say that they love utilizing this because it really pinpoints what they know and what they don't know and really focuses on their confidence level. It's not about a grade. It's really assuring them that, yeah, they're progressing. The next thing I'm going to focus on, I'm going to go click here and go back to the main dashboard. And when I think about that lesson 1, I can look at the student ebook. So I'm going to click right here and go to lesson 1, Poets and Heroes. And in utilizing that lesson plan, remember I told you all those assets? Well, the students have everything right here in front of them. I don't have to assign these things. They have what they need. But I am going to think about the levels of my students. So as a teacher, I can go into their profile and I can set them at different readability levels. And if I do, they're going to receive that book at their own pace. And the purpose here is I may want to present, just rather than doing a launch presentation, I may want to present and project my ebook to my students and say to them, okay, let's go through this together. That way everything's in order for you. You can pick and choose what you want from here. This is just another way, rather than going through that lesson plan and seeing all those choices that you can make, I'll say to the students, okay, you choose the resource that you want to look at. We'll go through bit by bit and turn the page. I'll highlight, they'll annotate, they'll use this information. So to make sure my students are really following along, to make sure they're really getting the concept, here's the trick I use to make sure that the lesson plan and instruction and how I've planned out the day is really benefiting my students. So I'm now going to go to the second resource to show you is the Reading Essentials. So again, this is an additional support piece. The Reading Essentials is the same exact student information broken down 2 years below level. Why is this important? I have my students use this as a study guide. They're able to take their notes, because some students do work great on digital, but some students need that paper pencil. Some students need it to really focus on the scaffolding and support. So the reading essentials takes the exact student instruction, your exact lesson plans, but breaks it down even further. So let's look at lesson 1 here. So I can assign this out. I can assign it if you're using Google Classroom, or if you just want students to work on this, they can actually type right on this document. It's a typable PDF, and it's taking all that information, but this is where students can jot down their notes, something that they connect to. They're using more graphic organizers as support. So again, I love this as a study guide, and it's one of those things that teachers say to me, well, how do you have time to work everything in? I'm just teaching a lesson. The students know that they can use this if they want. If they don't, that's their problem. But I always tell them this is a great resource as a study guide. It's going to benefit you. So this is something real important. So when I think about my lesson plan structure, and I'm a teacher that I need to remind myself week after week, what did I do? What worked? What didn't work? So just to remind yourselves, and when I go back to lesson plan, and I go back to that lesson 1, I'm going to customize my lesson plans right here. I'm going to click on the top right corner where it says customize. And I'm going to take the lesson plan that's here and kind of revise it. I'm just going to call my last name is Tatunik. I'm going to use Tutu as my lesson plan. And now I can actually type right on this lesson plan structure. So I can remind myself that I'm going to edit this first part. And I'm just going to remind myself, I can add a section that, at this juncture, I may want to add SmartBook, or I may want to remind myself to use or assign the reading essentials. Again, it's your choice, but use this lesson plan as a template. You can type on it, interact with it, and that way year after year, you can make modifications if you need to, but you know what works and what works within that time segment of your course. If there's anything that I'm talking about right now, and you need for me to repeat it again, just let me know in the chat box and I'll go through it again. If you have any questions, I'll go through that part again. But if you right now want to take a chance and go hands-on into your account and kind of look through it, and I'd be interested to see, have you guys been using Reading Essentials and SmartBook? What's been working for you? What are some of the successes you've had? So I just want to pause there for a moment and let some of you who are going hands-on just kind of dig in a little more. Make sure you know how to customize the lesson plan, look at the structure. And it's nice that now your lesson plans will always be there, and your new customize will be right here. So you're not ever ruining or disrupting the original one. You're just creating the new modified one. And you can continue always modifying this lesson plan. So I'm going to pause there for a moment, see if anybody has any questions in the chat box for me. Just make sure if you do, change it to make sure it's to everyone. And if you are going hands-on, or if you do need an extra demo code, let me know and I'll give you another code to get in.
This is your chance, guys. Ask the question. No question is a silly question. So if there's anything that's coming to your mind, Steve is here to help us out.
And what I do is as I go through a lesson, I always think about that one student. I don't know about you guys, but I always had that one student that maybe was disengaged or just struggled, needed more support. And I always think about that one child when kind of creating my lesson plans and think about how am I differentiating my lessons? Because quite often with social studies, we teach the same lesson to everyone. And is that really fair? Think about how you learned social studies. What was best for you? Was that lecture style best? Was that performance-based or project-based style best? So making sure you're accommodating for all of your students. Like I said, I'm going to continue on, but if you are going hands-on and you want me to pause or take a break, just let me know. Please let me know in the chat box. I'm going to click back to the title. And the third resource that I'm going to think about adding, and like I said, if I add something in my time period, I'm going to have to take something away. But I would urge you, I would urge you to look at the inquiry journal. We'll talk about kind of assigning and really what and why. So I'm going to look at this inquiry journal. This is a brand new piece. It's built on the C3 framework. So even though, let's say I'm a world history teacher, it's integrating economics, history, civics, geography, and it's really getting students to analyze. Rather than me providing a point blank question to my students, I want them generating a question. So you'll notice with the reading at the inquiry journal, there is the chapter 1, which is the student page, and then there's the teacher page. So don't ever assign the teacher page. And then there's going to be a rubric. So this is, again, a new piece. It's not mentioned in your lesson plan or teacher instruction, but let's talk about how I would use it and how I would assign it. So let me show you it first, and then let's think about the assignments, and I'll answer your question that you have in the chat box there. So it's built on 4 dimensions. So it's taking what you have instructed in the student book or in the teacher edition, but it's adding more primary and secondary sources. So if you're wanting more, you got more within the inquiry journal. It's always going to have, if I scroll down to the very bottom, it's always going to end with students taking informed action, something they can connect to. And that's what we want. We want our students to make this relevant for themselves, even though it's about something in the past. But this is dimension 4, where they're actually creating a project, making connections. So again, sometimes, like I said, I start here. And they can work on this throughout. A lot of conversations going to have. This is not me really. This is where the students are generating their questions, they're analyzing, it's supporting. So if I do choose to add the inquiry journal in, it's going to take extra time, and maybe another, I can do lesson 1 in the book, and then day 2 of my instruction class, my lesson plans may be purely the inquiry journal. So you have to decide how you want to use it. You can use parts of the inquiry journal, you can use it as, and again, when you begin your next chapter, try it. Ask your students what they like, what they prefer. So let's go ahead now and assign this resource. I'm just going to click on Tools. Remember, I'm not going to assign the teacher edition. I'm going to click on Tools, and I can open this resource, look at the resource. I can assign this resource, share it with my Google Classroom, or I can download it and print it out and provide my students with a printed out copy. Some of your students may need this. Right now, we're going to assign this resource. So you'll notice that document's right there. It's just for that 1 chapter. I'm going to set my assignment name. Whatever it says, give instruction here. Maybe, basic instruction. When do you want it to start? The due date and the expiration date. When do you want it to fall off the student's palette, the student's platform? We don't ever want to assign the students with too much work. It becomes very overwhelming. And then again, do I want to assign it to my class here? I'll just click on my student, or I can click on all my students. And remember, you'll have to assign it to each class individually. Once I assign, the students have this work. Like I said, they can do it. They can type right on the document, save it, send it to me however they want. It's just another resource. So when we talk about the assignment, that's just one of the ways. So a lot of times, there's, some of the students are going to work on this, but some of the students, it may be too high level for them. So the inquiry journal is one piece where I say, you know what, I always make sure that students have time to work in groups. And even if they're remote, let's say they are at home, they can do activities. There's a lot, especially with Google Classroom or whatever management system you're using. That's one way where several students can work on that assignment all together at once. So again, I don't have to assign every bit of it. I can just assign the pieces. So let's talk about that pre-assessment of that lesson and assigning an assessment now. So here's lesson 1 once again. When I look at my lesson presentation or the lesson itself, I'm going to zip down to expand all and go to the bottom. And that close and reflect, or that assessment, or even pre-assessment, I want to make sure I can know exactly how my students are doing. So I'm actually going to use the Assess tab because it gets graded for you automatically. So if students do take it online, I have immediate feedback. I know exactly how to drive my instruction. I click on Assess. And again, I have to choose my class individually. So all your classes, if you have different classes here, I'm going to go to My Test Library. And this is important because before I begin a lesson, I'm going to start with the end in mind. I'm not teaching towards a test, but I want to know exactly what are the key concepts that my students need to master. And if I have students that are struggling how am I going to get them to that point of mastery? So when I go to my test library, I have my tests, and these are the tests that the authorship team have created, both in English and in Spanish. So I'm going to go to the authored tests. None of the ones I've customized yet, just the author's test here. And I'm always going to have a pre-assessment. I'm always going to have a quiz for every single lesson, and then my culminating chapter assessment or projects. But please do not feel like you have to always give an assessment. Use a project as a formative assessment. So let's say I'm looking, you'll see it does order these sometimes backwards, just an FYI. So I'm going to go to page 12 here, it was where I have chapter 1, and we're looking at lesson 3, a quiz on Mesopotamia. So when I look at this assignment here, I'm going to preview this test and think about, is this something that all my students can do? What if they do struggle with the readability level? So when I assign this test, I can say that I want them to have an audio feature or a text-to-speech feature. I want them to have a line writer feature. What is it that they need to have success with this specific test? So I'm going to start my test here. And here's a matching here. And so I let my students have the highlighting tool, the notepad tool, the magnifying tool, the line reader. I always let them have these tools. Why not? It's going to be additional support for them. So as they go through these questions, again, all this is graded for me automatically. It's just going to be a 6-question test. Very easy, but that way I know how to drive my instruction. That way I know who has mastered what points I need to spend more time on. So when I look at that lesson plan and I think about adding SmartBook, adding the inquiry drill, this is what helps me decide what I'm going to spend my time on within that lesson. So even though this is a quiz assessment based on what they are going to learn, I may want to start off with this as a pre-assessment to see where they're at and really which students I need to focus on. So I'm going to go ahead and close this test and say I like it. I don't need to customize it. But right now, I just simply want to assign this now. I'm going to click on the cog here, the cog wheel. And I can simply assign it or schedule this assignment just the way I showed you before. Same thing, and it's scheduled out. I'm going to pause there for a moment before I go into the next thing. And again, open up to any questions. I want to make sure there's anything in the chat box. Oh, the screen is flashing. I'm going to turn my camera off. Just sometimes I know it takes some data. So I'm going to turn my camera off. I'll turn it back on at the end. And let me know if you guys have any issues with the audio or any picture at all. But I'm going to pause there right now. I want to know so far in the chat box, what is the one thing that you would use or do differently based on what I've shown so far? I want to hear from everyone. What is the one thing that you would do or consider doing, whether it's tomorrow or next week, or what you would change in the way you've taught so far? I'll be really intrigued to see your responses. And then, yes, they'll talk about kind of the projects or the simulations that are available. Let's make sure you're using the chat box. I'll give you another minute. I don't see any chats coming in yet. Like I do with my students, I'm going to give that wait time. Give me a chance to take a drink, actually. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think about, you talk about students who are below level. One, a lot of teachers didn't know that they could adapt the ebook at a lower level. So let me keep continuing to keep in your posts, but let me just remind you of where that feature is. So when I go to manage and assign, and I pull up my classes and my students, all of your students are listed here under your classes. If I were to click on the profile setting here, it allows me to choose what level of the ebook they're being assigned. So like I said, the ebook, if I choose approaching level, about a year below level, that's what they would see. They would have actually more scaffolded support. But if I were to assign them even the reading essentials, that's 2 years below level with even further support. So absolutely, I just think all my students should have the right to have that access. They may, I can have a high level student that maybe struggles with writing. They still need certain support features. So again, manage and assign, choose your class or classes here. Then you'll have all your students listed under my classes, and then just under profile, change the readability setting, and they will automatically receive their ebook, just as we saw here in the lesson plans. Scratch that. Just like we saw here in the student edition, and when they click on their book, it's going to look exactly the same, but they're actually going to have more support pieces here. It'll be scaffolded slightly, so I'm going to see if I can change my book here to the approaching grade level to see if you notice the difference. Do you see how it changed? And sometimes I'll say to a student just privately, hey, just so you know, the students between themselves never really seem to know or seem to care. But I may say to them, hey, I provided you with more support with your ebook because I saw that you needed, however you want to word it to them, but I usually let them know. So hopefully that's helpful. And just as a reminder, going back to the reading essentials, this is something I automatically they have access to it already, but I do assign it to them just to remind them, hey, try and look at this first, go through it first before you begin instruction in the class. That way they're walking in with a confidence level that they may have not had before. See some more chats coming in. So once again, you're letting me know what is one thing you would try so far that maybe you haven't tried, or if you have a question. I'd love to hear from everyone. And as you're kind of adding some more conversation here, the one other element that I think about when I'm focusing on my lesson structure is the BTW, the by the way. A lot of times teachers don't get to this. They don't know what it is. Again, it's not mentioned in the teacher instruction of that lesson plan. So I'm going to add this in. But this is where my students, even if they want to select current events, just as a bell ringer, just something for the first 5 minutes of class that we can discuss. And this will be, you'll see different tags and different resources. So all this stuff you should know, what's happening around the world today. This is updated on a bi-weekly basis. Just a lot of great current event topics, a lot of debate topics for my students. So this is just something for you to use how you wish. So if you know you're about to teach a topic that's difficult for your students to grasp, start off with a fun moment. Start off with getting them engaged and having discussions before you just nail them with kind of talking about a time period that they struggle to relate with. So again, that's the BTW. So I'm going to go back here for a moment and kind of pull this all together in a full lesson structure. So I'm going to start off once again with that end in mind. If I want, I can choose the assessment, and this will be graded for me automatically where I can see the data. And just as a reminder, when I go to assess, I have my online assessments, and this is where I have my gradebook. So all the data filters into my gradebook. So I will know exactly how my students are doing and analyze every single concept within the gradebook as it populates more and more. So going back to the online assessment, I can begin with a pre-assessment. So here's my first period class. I have my demo class here, so I don't have many students. These are the tests that I've already assigned, but I'm going to go back and assign one from the very beginning. I'm going to go to new test would mean if I'm creating a test. You can create all the tests you want. You can customize the tests if you want. I feel like we have enough already in our library. So I'm going to go to the My Test library. And this is where you're going to find all of the author-created tests already set for you. So again, these are the ones that I've customized. So don't look at these. I've customized them. I'm going to go straight to My Tests. Choose. You would just have a Spanish or English one, or just the one there. I know you don't need the Spanish one, but you just have the one category there. And once I click on that category, these are all of these assessments. So again, looking at the world history here, It goes alphabetized, kind of, sometimes it's hard to find, so here's the trick. I'm going to say I'm on chapter 4 right now. So rather than going page by page by page, that's a lot of pages to go through. I'm going to go to, let's see, chapter 9, getting there, almost there. I'm going to go to, let's say, chapter 3, or chapter 4 was it? I'm going to go to chapter 4, and this is what we just covered. And I can look at the ones here. Maybe I want to assign this additional question one, this Greek culture one, but let's say I find the one I want. So I'm working on lesson 3. I want to assign this quiz and maybe assign it as a pre-assessment. Once I go through, I can copy the test, I can assign the test, print the test, preview the test. So rather than just assigning it to the class, I'm going to go ahead and copy this test. And I'll tell you the reason why in a moment. Once I copy that test and create a copy, I'm going to call it what it is, and I can change this. I can even change this to my name or however I want to change this, or put my initials up front. That way, all of my tests that I really want to find and not having to go through and dig through will automatically appear in order of the ones that I chose. So like I said, I changed the name so it's specific to what I'm assigning. So I may call this pre-assessment. And then that assessment helps me launch the initial instruction. Now, again, going back to the lesson plan. As I mentioned before, within each lesson, there's always the chapter wrap-up, where it always has a great project. I may want to start off with that project as an assessment activity or a performance task activity. The third thing I mentioned was in the inquiry journal, dimension 4 always has a project. So please don't feel like you always need to give a test. You're trying to evaluate your students. Some of my struggling students that maybe the readability level is difficult for them, I'm not going to give them assessment. I'm going to give more of a project to do. And here's the rubric that for grading purposes. Or like you said, maybe I want to give them a simulation. So under the search here, I can look at all of the resources. So I'm going to go to additional resources or search, either one, and I can just type in. So depending on the topic that you teach, I'll just type in simulations. And these are just some additional simulation activities that you can do with your students. So again, I prefer easily just to type it in, keywords, bam, it's going to be there for me. Then it lets me know here, this is on grade level 1. I could favorite it so I never forget where this is. I can simply assign this resource to my class, have them work as a groups, or assign to my Google Classroom. Either one. I see a lot more questions coming in. Let me make sure I address all your questions. So I want to make sure that you feel comfortable, Adil, as far as talking about assignments and the assessment part. Do you feel comfortable like that? If you want me to go into a little more deeper, please let me know. And then the different levels for differentiation. Remember, if I'm going into the class manager and I change their profile setting, that is where I can change it to the approaching level, and they'll receive the ebook at that level. When I make a test, they go to the assess part and click take now, but a blank appears. Oh, let me show you a great thing for that. I love my students, but sometimes my students will say, I don't see this, or I'm not getting this. What I always do when I assign something, and we'll go through the assessment in a moment, is I'll go to under lesson plans, scratch that, under manage and assign. I will go to my students, my classes here. So this is where you're going to see your students here. And I can view and actually log in or emulate that student to see what is it that they really assigned. What is it that they really have? If your assessment portion, the way you print it out or the way it's showing is not how you want to see it, then that's the reason that I always go into that assessment. So again, I'm not going to go to new tests unless you want to create your own test. But when you create your own test, you really have to be methodical about your spacing and leaving blanks. So I always go to the My Test library. I always then choose the test that I want that's already been created, but I'll copy that test, change it to what I want, and that way the students are going to see, even if you want to print it out, they're going to see it in the exact same setting, format. I don't have to worry about if there's a blank page or whatever. That's just the way I remember. So if you need to remember the steps, you'll get a recording of this, but I can edit the test settings and all of that's there. And just as a reminder, in the resources, under the professional development, we have a great video about just simply assigning assessments and really digging in deep with assessments. Yeah, a lot of resources here that I covered, but like I said, I'm choosing the ones I want. Like I said, I love to start off with a bell ringer using the current events from BTW, and the students, I don't have to assign it. They actually have it on their platform. So when I go to a student account, it's the same book we just looked at. We'll do world history and geography. They're all the same. It's consistent. In my account, I'm just going to go to a student edition just so you can see what the student is really seeing. So they have all their assessments right here of what I've assigned to them. They automatically, I don't have to assign, they automatically have the inquiry journal. They automatically have the reading essentials. They can type on this and send it to me. They automatically have the by the way, the current events where they can choose if they want. I don't always have to say, hey, let's talk about this. I can say, hey, what would you like to talk about? You choose something as a class. When they log on to their ebook, when they click go, if I had gone to that profile setting and changed the ebook for them, when they click go, they would actually see their book at a slightly lower level. They won't know it's the same exact content, same exact essential questions. They may have additional supporting resources, but it's really going to be the same. I love that question about integrating social and other subject matters, because again, social and emotional learning is going to come into play here. And when you talk about integrating the other subject matter, that is the true reason that we designed the inquiry journal. So just to show you here, within the inquiry journal, and why I feel this is kind of my new must-do, where I always recommend using this, please try it out. So let's just look at Chapter 4. Remember, it's always going to be the student page that you can assign, that they'll have access to, and then for the students' cases, they don't see the teacher, so just know they're never going to see the teacher. Don't worry about that. But I want you to see here where the integration automatically of economics, history, civics, and geography are going to be mentioned here. And you're going to see call-outs throughout the way. These are new primary and secondary sources. So you'll see the color coding tabs here. And this follows along exactly what you're teaching. Sometimes there's more geography, more economics. There's an economics one. And I always say to social studies teachers, that's why a lot of times I love to do trainings where I actually talk to the English teachers as well as the language arts teachers, as well as the social studies teachers, because you are responsible. You are teaching the reading, speaking, and listening skills, whether you will like it or not. You're really teaching all of the same subject matters and concepts and standards. So I always talk about integrating that reading and that the basic skills, the ELA skills, the language arts skills that a normal teacher would have. So even some of the connections with even science, because again, a lot of it is an art. I really make sure that when I'm teaching social studies, I'm bleeding that all together, because I may have a student in my class that, I hate to say it, but just doesn't care about the past. They're not caring about learning about Greek time periods, but man, if art is their skill set, I'm going to have them really dig deeper into some of those art facets and really the civilization time period that they will be engaged in. So that's just one tip. I could spend hours going much deeper into integration of subject matter. Maybe we'll kind of pivot that for another training along the way. But in our time together, in our last 4 minutes, I want to make sure that you are getting out of our time period what you want. So again, please feel free to ask any questions, and please continue responding, because I always love it. It's important to me as a trainer and support what was most beneficial for you and what you will actually use or do tomorrow in class differently than what you've been doing. And thank you for the positive comments coming in.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much. That you covered quite a bit in the session today, and I'm glad that you covered a lot of aspects from also the assessment and the differentiation as well. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that you've covered quite a bit of the questions that came in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, as we went along. And like I said, he will be able to pick up questions as and when. So feel free to drop that. And if anyone has any questions, I know we're at the top of the hour and perhaps just 5 minutes left. But if you have any burning questions, yes, you can ask us now.
And Suresh, I would love to know if, when we do these support, I always want to know from teachers, like 2 weeks down the road, did they try something? Was it a success? So if you would email that, like anything support-wise, I always love to share with other teachers, hey, so-and-so tried this, it worked successfully. And that's great information and great feedback for us to know what worked. Or if there are still struggles, let us know. That's really important. So we can help you overcome those struggles.
That's actually a very great idea. If you've implemented something that worked in your class, we would love to know what worked, what didn't work for you. We want to hear from you. So let us know, email us back. And at this point, I should perhaps be sharing my screen so I can drop you that email address where you can reach out to us. So let me just quickly open up my screen. Just share.
And I just want to say right now, thank you, those of you who took your time today. I know some of you were celebrating Halloween, some of you didn't, but thank you for taking the time and joining me today. And I look forward to supporting you guys in the future.
Yes, just to echo Steve's words, we're always happy to help teachers make sure they get most out of the program. And we do have actually one more session that's tomorrow for Alex. So make sure you're social studies teacher, so I wouldn't say make sure, but if you're looking for a math, like I know we had a couple of math teachers who joined us this afternoon or evening now. But if you want to join us for that session, make sure you register. It's one of the last sessions that we have, but thank you so much for being such a fantastic audience. And this is the screen. As you can see, you can get in touch with us at marketing.emia@mheducation.com. As you can see on your screen, that's marketing.emia@mheducation.com. Drop us a line if you had something in your class that worked for you for social studies or any of our programs for that matter. We'd love to know from you. And you can also stay connected on our social channels with us. That's also on your screen. I just want to remind you that you will get a copy of this session. So you will have the recording with you. We will send you by email. I think you should have it in your inbox by tomorrow. And we'll also be sharing certificates to those of you who attended the live webinar for today. But also, if you were registered but did not happen to attend, no problem at all. We will still be giving you the recording of this session. Unless you have any questions for me or Steve, we can sign off for this session for now. And I'm just going to quickly check the chat box. Amazing session. Thank you. Tomorrow is which subject? Khalid, tomorrow we are covering Reveal Math. That's one of the last sessions that we have. And I can drop the registration link for you. So in case you're interested, you can have a look about all the sessions that we are currently running. But other than that, thank you so much for keeping this so interactive and being here. We're so happy to help teachers achieve their goals. We hope you found this session really, really useful. And this is bye from me and Steve. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. And I've just dropped the link in the chat box. We have Alex tomorrow if you want to join us. Bye. Take care.